enjoy a seat at the table and good company, where great conversations and meaningful discussions happen.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz. We all know that a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussion. And Good Company gives you a seat at the table to enjoy smart and interesting conversations as they happen. I am pleased to be in the company of Rabbi Meir Bargeron, who is the spiritual leader for Fort Wayne's congregation Achduth Vesholom. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's really great to be here.
So you just started as the temple spiritual leader. You came really even in the midst of COVID.
I absolutely did. Yeah, I started July 1st. I moved to Fort Wayne in May to get ready, and we all know what the world was like then. It's a little different now, but yeah, what an interesting time to move to a new town.
And your background and story is filled with lots of what you could say these are interesting times. So let's talk a little bit. You're what I like to refer to as a late in life rabbi. Like somebody, a lot of people think that you're born into like a family of rabbis, or you've known from a young age you want to be a rabbi. But you actually had a full career and life before becoming a rabbi. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely a second career rabbi. I was actually ordained in May. It'll be a year. So before I was a rabbi, I worked basically I started off my career in the early 90s in the Bay Area, working in technology and sort of early .com stuff. And then I felt myself really wanting to work with people. And so I was working in human resources, so that's more like about people.
Right, yeah.
And then I realized, wow, we could do really cool stuff in like leadership development and coaching. But then I realized I was interested mostly in the person in front of me.
Okay.
And that that worked out okay. But that led me to take a new direction. I was still in my 20s. And so I decided I wanted to pursue a degree in social work. So I went to graduate school, earned an MSW, and then worked as a social worker and therapist for a number of years. And Jewish life became more important to me.
Okay. But let's stop there for a second. Because you were not born Jewish.
No.
So, and you grew up in a small community in Michigan.
Yeah.
Now, was your family religious, or did you, or was it that you just didn't have religion in your family growing up?
Yeah.
Or?
So I grew up in a small town in northern Michigan, Petoskey.
Right. So there probably weren't a lot of Jews.
There is a small, lovely Jewish community there, but not a lot of people.
Right.
And so I grew up in a Catholic family.
Okay.
And I'd say our family was pretty religious. I did the things that the life cycle things that young people do.
Right.
And I grew up loving God and loving coming together. I actually said, let's go to church when I was a little kid. And then as life went on, I learned as I got older that I'm gay.
Okay.
And so for me, that disrupted my ability to be a faithful Catholic. But there are many LGBTQ Roman Catholics who live with a great deal of integrity in their faith and are in the church. So that is a path I respect. It wasn't going to be my path.
Okay.
So I ended up we have a few years here going.
Right. We're doing a little
I ended up so shall we say spiritual but not religious.
Okay.
And so back to social work.
Okay.
So I had to do an internship to finish my degree. And so of all the places that I could have ended up, I was placed at Jewish Family and Children's Service in Minneapolis, which is where I was living at that point. And so I did what social workers do, and it came time to leave, and I realized there was something missing in my life. And what happened was I fell in love with the Jewish people.
did you fall in love with the people, or did you fall in love with Judaism?
It was the people. I basically became a part of a community.
Okay.
I was the non-Jewish social work student,
Right.
and I was invited to bat mitzvahs and to Shabbat dinners.
Well, we take all members of the tribe, so
absolutely.
But that goes back to the belief that we're all come from the same parents, in a sense, Adam and Eve. So we really are one people. Right?
Sure.
So
absolutely.
I mean, so we are welcoming, and
we are indeed, and so it was through communal life that I first connected to Jewishness, and when I left my internship, then I sort of had a crisis, a problem, which led me to ask some pretty important religious questions, and led me to walk into a synagogue in Minneapolis, and so. That's how that part of my life began.
But most people then who would convert, because then you converted, right, would not then become a rabbi.
No, it's not required, right? No. So what happened was living Jewish life was very exciting and very rewarding, and I began.
What spoke to you about Jewish? What you say as doing Jewish.
Yeah.
Like, what was it that you felt? Because you really have a very interesting perspective to really assess. I know from an academic understanding the difference between Catholicism and Judaism, but you really had the opportunity to experience it. So what is it that you felt that either you weren't getting from the Catholic Church, or what is it that spoke to you in a way that other religions didn't, that Judaism did? Yeah.
I've told this story using Torah, so sorry to sound like a rabbi for a second.
That's okay.
But in the book of Genesis, this is the story of the Tower of Babel.
Okay.
And so basically the people are wanting to get closer to God. The story kind of assumes some arrogance in that desire, and they build a tower to get closer to heaven, and that can't happen. And so, as the story goes, God confused their languages, so people could not understand each other anymore. And so the way that connects to my story is very simply, I found a language in which I could express and experience my relationship with God and with God's creation. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that language, to stretch the metaphor a little further, was Judaism. And so once I was part of a community, I immediately felt just a tremendous joy. Mm-hmm. So I got very involved. Mm-hmm. You get somebody new who walks into a congregation, and it's like, hey, put them on a committee, right?
Right.
So my life increasingly became centered on life in the Jewish community and in my congregation, and then I realized, I was working, right? I had like a day job,
right?
And I realized that the center of my life was really, really moving towards my Jewishness, and so I met, I made an appointment with my rabbi, and I said, Rabbi, I've kind of got a problem. I love the work I'm doing. I was working as a therapist, and so I counseling people, and I was doing training and teaching people, and I was running some nonprofit programs, so making stuff happen, and I'm just feeling like I just want to do Jewish all the time. And so I think the rabbi saw it was coming, even if I didn't, and so he's quiet, and he said, that sounds a lot like what I do. And so then...
Well, because a rabbi is spiritual, he is a therapist, he is a social worker, he's a problem solver, he's a confidant.
Right, yeah. So that led me to the path to discernment, to see if this was really something that I was called to do. And one thing led to another, and I started rabbinical school a few years later.
Right. And how old were you when you started rabbinical school?
I started rabbinical school at 48.
Okay. So, and how long have you been married?
I have been married, oh gosh, I have to do math in my head. So I've been married, it will be 5 years this
was
fall.
your husband John, right?
Yeah.
Was he with you through this whole path, making all these transitions, or did he meet you once you already were on this path to become a rabbi?
I was already planning to apply to rabbinical school when he and I met, so that slowed things down a little bit because,
right. But I just meant he wasn't, so he didn't see you go through all. He just got you when you were
No.
going to make this, but it was a significant
Yeah,
change.
that's right. So we had to have the talk. This is what I'm thinking of doing with my life. We should probably talk about whether
Right.
it makes sense for us to
Right.
continue.
And is he? He's not Jewish.
He's
Correct?
Jewish, yeah.
Oh, was he Jewish? Did he convert, or was he born?
Well, I'll let him tell his own story,
Okay.
but I will say he did convert to Judaism in his life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, can I just ask one other question?
Yeah,
did
sure.
he do that before he met you, or did he do that because of his life with you?
It started after we met.
Okay.
And then one thing I'll say about John is John grew up in New York City, lived on the Lower East Side, and I always teased him that his Jewish cultural competence, at least Ashkenazi Jewish cultural competence, was like off the charts compared to mine.
Right.
So
yeah. So he probably already knew some Yiddish phrases and where to get the good bagels and challah.
He does know where to get that, and it was a very authentic path for him, and it was beautiful and an honor to walk with him through that.
So let's just. I want to stay for a second about understanding Judaism in a sense, because I think that Judaism is a very pragmatic religion. Mm-hmm. It's not about love. It's not about doing things because you're going to get rewarded in another life. I mean, it's very pragmatic that there are laws and you follow the laws, and it's not about so I think that there's something very smart about it. But I think that there's also a lot of issues that lead to what else I want to talk to you about, which is obviously anti-Semitism and racism and where we are as a country, is this idea of Jews being the chosen people. Mm-hmm. And when I wanted to understand about 10 years ago, I really wanted to understand why everybody hates us and hated us. Like, what is it that we really did that made us, and that seems to be one of the areas that people think that Jews think that they're better than everyone else, or that they think that they're, by being selected by God, that he puts them in a different category. So I wanted to just start with, because I have a rabbi at the table, to sort of give a little bit of that perspective and understanding of what really was the intent or the meaning behind being the chosen people.
Sure. I'm going to answer that. I want to just respond to one thing in your framing. I think anti-Semitism is a very serious problem that we live with in our world today.
Yes.
I don't think everyone hates us.
Okay.
Actually, I have encountered many amazing interactions with people who are not Jewish.
I didn't mean it in the literal sense. I mean, I look at it when I think about countries that just want to wipe us off the face of the earth, or that they question Israel's right to exist, or they're questioning, and especially with anti-Semitism and even within COVID, and just accusing what they accuse us of. I'm not saying that I have lots of, but I was saying more the feeling is more, I often feel that we're not liked more than we are liked. And you're looking at it in a much more positive way, is certainly why you're the rabbi, because, to look at that from a spiritual guidance and perspective.
Yeah.
So, but what is it? What is that essence of what that means?
Sure. It's definitely both and there's some serious socio-political global problems. I totally agree with you there. So I think that this is, just one person's view. Okay, I'm a rabbi, so one rabbi's view. The essence, the core of anti-Semitism is the same core of all other hatred of other. And it's the same problem, and each group that encounters some degree of bias or discrimination, or is the target of violence in different times in different places, it happens in a unique way that is connected to how that group is in that society. So it plays out a little differently and it looks different, but the core, I believe, is fear of other.
Right.
In terms of the Jewish story, one thing that you asked about chosenness, and I I believe chosenness is a conversation that you can have actually a very deep theological conversation about with many points of view. So I will speak for myself, and I would say probably for people on the more liberal progressive spectrum of Jewish life.
Which is where we are, and where the congregation is.
Which is where I function. So the world I live in. I personally understand chosenness as the relationship. Judaism is the story of the relationship between God and the children of Israel.
Right. It's the covenant that man makes with God to live by certain values on a day-to-day basis. That is the whole premise of Judaism.
I'll take that.
Okay. You can thank Rabbi Kronish for that.
So I believe personally, I frame chosenness. There's definitely a choice was made. God chose us, and we chose God. And so I find it much more spiritually challenging and constructive to think about what it means for me as a Jew to be a person who wakes up every day and affirms that I am in a relationship with God.
Right.
And I'm in a relationship with God. You're in a relationship with God. Personally, I believe that that all human beings are in a relationship with God, but I kind of let them honor their way of describing that.
And we're okay with that. I mean, as Jews, we want everybody. We don't try to convert or proselyte. We want everybody to find God and live by the tenets of God, how they choose to live that way.
Yeah, I think so. So chosenness, I think it is really, from my perspective, about choosing to engage in the covenant, in this relationship with God, and you talked about commandments. Mm-hmm. I recently had a chance to talk about this with some congregants, and some of the things in Torah are very like, be a good person, don't kill, right. And some other things in Torah are very, very specific. So anyway, the commandments, one way of looking at them is sort of the love language that the Jews have with God. It's the way that we are able to express our relationship with God and our connection with God.
Okay.
So being Jewish is about choosing
mm-hmm.
to be a part of this enterprise.
Right. Okay.
So what's the intersection between being a Jewish people, choosing to be in relationship with God, God choosing to be in relationship with us, and anti-Semitism?
Okay.
Oh, I don't think you can tie it up with a very neat bow. As a Jew, I am obligated to live a Jewish life, and and for me that includes being authentically who I am, mm-hmm. and also being a part of a larger society, mm-hmm. and contributing to that. Anti-Semitism is another ism, and it's a serious problem. And it's not just a problem in the Middle East. It's not just a problem in big cities on the coasts with larger Jewish populations. It's a problem everywhere, and it is our unique challenge, mm-hmm. But it should help us to find connections with other oppressed peoples.
See, I also thought that when you talk about us being chosen, I sort of felt like we're chosen we were given a mission, which was this tikkun olam, to heal the world. Yeah. And we were put on a mission to do right, and to, let people, nobody should be suppressed. We don't believe in slavery. We believe that, everybody should enjoy living their lives. And so I looked at it more like we were put on this mission, and that was sort of our purpose. Mm-hmm. Because, what we focus on is what you can do now. How, everything we sort of do is for the younger generation, the next generation, to make it better for them. So I looked at it more from that standpoint, and then the role that Jews play in terms of social justice, which I know is a big area of focus for you. So, can you talk a little bit about that role and purpose, and how, because, one of the things, I had the pleasure of interviewing Rabbi Paula Winnig when she was the interim rabbi. She sat at this table, and we were talking about how anti-Semitism is racism.
Yeah.
You know, so it is connected. But this idea of social justice, and that plays, to me, a very important role in being Jewish and living a Jewish life.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about that in terms of also how we not only see it in terms of our defense and, about anti-Semitism, but also racism, or even the op-ed you recently wrote about with the Asian Americans and the Pacific Islander people. So talk about where that fits in.
Sure. So, this is springtime, and it is the season in Jewish life of Passover,
right.
The festival when we commemorate and we remember, and at our Seder tables we reenact the Exodus
from slavery in
Egypt, the redemption of the Israelites from slavery. And for me, that experience is sort of a cornerstone of understanding the responsibility, the particular Jewish responsibility we have in the world. So our Torah teaches us that we are always to remember that we were strangers, that we were slaves in the land of Egypt, that it is a part of our DNA, it is a part of who we are, and we were redeemed from that, and brought into a promised land, and brought into a life with God. In terms of social justice, for me it is built around understanding that experience of being oppressed. Our faith also teaches that we are not to oppress the widow or the orphan, to basically make sure that those who are vulnerable in our society have what they need to live a dignified life. So,
and it's not just, it doesn't only extend to people. I mean, we have a responsibility for animals. If we see an animal suffering, I mean, that's why, Jews don't hunt, is because we have to unburden that animal. I mean, so it's really that we even fight the justices for the animals, too.
It is respect and tending to God's creation. That's right.
And that includes the world, too, literally our environment. And
that's right. And so the expression you use, tikkun olam, which is often used to describe social justice, it literally means repair of the world.
Right.
And so this isn't. This is Jewishness. I care about these things, and I endeavor to do things to make the world a more whole place, because my faith demands that of me.
And because we have seen repeatedly being oppressed, or obviously the hatred and the repercussions of that, and the impact. And clearly one of them obviously is the Holocaust.
That's right.
And it's interesting that the Holocaust, Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day, is actually falling within Passover.
Right after.
It's right after, right?
Yeah.
It's like the next day, right? Yeah. So so this whole idea of what the Jews suffered and experienced during the loss during the Holocaust, and how we serve this day to remember, because we can never forget, because should we forget, then history repeats itself. But it is repeating itself. I mean, we see it. Genocide is still happening. Right. Hatred and picking, segmenting people, or pointing out, blaming them for things that happen because of how they look, or their color, their skin, or religion. So I mean, I think that we look at it living in this world of social justice, yet we don't seem to be making any progress, or maybe, I don't know. I mean, what do you?
It's hard to see sometimes, right?
Right.
For sure. So you made I think it was an important connection to make. So you describe Yom HaShoah, the day of Shoah, the day that we remember Shoah, which is a Hebrew word that we use to say Holocaust. And
it really means death, though, doesn't it? Isn't it the Shoah is like like a mass killing?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah.
I will look it up and get back to you. Okay.
Because I'm sure there's also some. I'm sure there's some with the Hebrew letters and the numerics, and you'll come back with some. There will be something.
You can tell people after I'm gone what we came back with. But so it's a day where we remember the atrocity of the Holocaust, and it's history, but it is also a very Jewishly religious way of looking at history. Remember what I said a moment ago, that we are to never forget that we were an oppressed people, slaves in Egypt, strangers in a strange land. We are never to forget that. We are a people and a religion of memory. And Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom HaShoah, which is actually a religious festival, and it is actually a legal holiday in the state of Israel. It is the day that we remember this unspeakable atrocity, and we're very old people, and so the period from when the Holocaust happened to now has been a big blink of an eye in Jewish time. And we still have people who are survivors who experience that directly.
But in 5 years, there will not be any survivors left.
It is year by year by year, month by month. The number of survivors left is dwindling. So remembrance is very important now, because remembrance not only is remembering our history, but it's also honoring the people who have survived that experience and deserve our care and our respect. But the baseline of all of it is memory, and that is a very Jewish act to remember.
And why do you think that it is so important also for us to engage with the community to remember? And, to remind them what happened when, such hatred and scapegoating and, blame occurred.
Sure. I think there's multiple reasons. One reason it's very important is that Jews in America, we are Americans. We're here. And this is a part of our history. So many of us have grandparents and great-grandparents and other relatives who either survived or perished in Europe during the Holocaust. And so this is a part of our history. And so America is a land of many peoples.
Right.
And so it is woven into the fabric of the American story, because there are Americans, Jewish Americans, who brought this with them as a part of their personal history.
Which is why we also really support immigrants, because we really believe that that everybody's an immigrant.
That's right.
Before 1924, there weren't any immigration laws or quotas, and so that's also, do you think, why we also have empathy for immigrants, or the plight of what's happening at the border, or issues with those who feel disenfranchised in the country in which they live?
Yes, I think so. I think that certainly Jews in America came to America as immigrants, as virtually everyone has come to America as immigrants, unless you are Native American people. And so, that is very much a part of our story. But it's also a story we know, because we've been through it before, because we were immigrants from Egypt, right? So it is part of our story, and so we have empathy for those who have that same experience. And it's interesting. There's an organization called HIAS, which was it's a very old organization, certainly into the first decades of the 20th century. I wish I could look it up right now, but it's been around a long time, and it was established as an organization to help Jews escape Europe and to settle in America. Well, now HIAS is an organization that helps refugees around the world. And so the organization transformed its mission, right? Not to helping a people, but to help all people who are facing oppression and are refugees. So yes, I think the refugee story is our story, and so it is on us to understand that experience in America and to do what we can to ensure that immigrants are treated fairly and justly. But I wanted to get back to Yom HaShoah. So why is it important in a community? So one is, it's our story and we're here. And also, we know in our experience as Jews that things happen in cycles. And so the story of the Holocaust is a story of a society that that in a very short period of time made massive changes in its political climate.
And it was very quick. Very quickly.
Very quick. And so in a short period of time, it went from basically a group of people came in power, the National Socialist Party, the Nazis, and as a result of them implementing their policies, to give it a very neutral sounding.
Well, they actually used the democratic system and law.
That's right.
To implement their laws. It was a very democratic process that they used.
And so basically they unleashed tremendous levels of discrimination and ultimately oppression and evil, targeted at the Jews in the world that they ruled, but also other people.
Right.
Who we must not ever forget were
Right.
also a part of the oppression of the Holocaust. However, as Americans, why it is important for us to note Yom HaShoah, certainly from a Jewish perspective, we understand that, but why I think it's important for our entire community and our society to take note of that is that we must protect our democracy, so that what happened to the Jews and to other oppressed peoples in Europe in the 1930s and 40s never happens again, not there and not here.
Right. And what people don't realize is that Hitler, it wasn't a coup. It wasn't like a military takeover. I mean, he used the democratic process to be elected, but it was what he did once he got elected. But does it concern you, though, that 1 in 3 young people, the Pew Research, they don't know what the Holocaust is. They can't identify what Auschwitz is. I mean, this year it's 76 years since the liberation of Auschwitz. And so I think you think about when, in the 1990s, when you learned about what was 100 years ago, and that seems so far off and it could never happen. And so that they don't even know history, or there's no collective memory. And the fact that, the FBI projected, that this year anti-Semitic activities will increase, will report 20% increase.
That's right.
So hatred, and we see it. I mean, it's not just against Jews. I mean, it's against anyone who is different than what a group believes their right is and who they are. And we certainly saw that on January 6th, and then we're seeing it with the recent massacre in Georgia, that this hatred and is animosity and is just rampant.
That's right.
So obviously then, is just memory and history, is it enough?
Well, I think you've zeroed in on something that is very important and very concerning, and that is that I think we face the risk as a society of becoming increasingly ahistorical, losing our context. And so the example of the Pew study that found the ever shrinking number of young people who can identify key aspects of the history of the Holocaust, it is concerning. It's concerning on multiple levels. It's concerning in terms of what that means for the potential for anti-Semitism, on an ongoing basis in our country. And also, I mean, there's other history that I imagine is also being forgotten. So it doesn't bode well for for us being a society that understands who we are, how we got here, and the old saying that if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it, right? And so I think that is of great concern.
Well, and we can see it with sort of the cancel culture or the rewriting, certainly with the African American story, that people are forgetting it or wanting to cancel out certain aspects of it or the reality of it. So, but obviously, though, just having it as our history and reminding isn't enough. I mean, does that where the social justice part comes in, or?
Well, I guess that's a good point. Is memory enough? And I'd say that memory is important, and no, it's probably not enough.
Right.
And for me, I guess knowing that this is in my history as a Jew and in the history of every Jew, as well as every citizen of a country that has, had bad stuff happen. Memory keeps, it honors those who have been oppressed and who have been killed.
And it reminds us of those who were here before us and
does.
whose shoulders we are built upon.
Absolutely, and it also lets us kind of affirms who we are, and so for me, we must remember, and then we must do. And so the questions I ask myself is, what does the Shoah, the Holocaust, what does that command of me? Understanding that, what does that command of me as a Jew in the world today? And so to me, that is I think circles back to making the world a safe place, not just repairing it, but repairing it so that it's a safe and just place, and ensuring that. We say never again, and we certainly mean never again for us, but never again for anyone.
Right, but we're seeing it. I mean, you see it in, with the in Myanmar. We see it with the certain groups in India and China. I mean, these genocides are continuing, and
that's right.
And so I worry, that maybe our memory is failing us, or But I was also wondering when I was thinking about the time in which you have chosen to become a rabbi.
Yeah.
Because now, I mean, the American Jews used to be a little bit over 2% of the American population. We're now 1.9%. And there is some prediction that with assimilation and, interfaith marriages and lack of millennials wanting to go to organized religion, that by 2050, there may not be American Jewry, may not exist, with this, what I think of as a new type of anti-Semitism that is being developed now. I wonder if you think like this was the best time to become a rabbi and to because you're sort of, and if you look at also, I mean, the fact of the matter is, you look at even in Fort Wayne, I mean, you can see the average age of the congregation. I mean, it's not thriving. I mean, I just learned that they closed. They had to close the nursery school, and now it's a Bright Start. They rent out the space, so you're still educating youth. But to me, that was the cornerstone of every temple.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, because you also, it's not only is it the decline, but you're also in a community where there's not like a growing surge of Jewish families here. So I just wonder, does that make you more determined, or feel that you even have more of a purpose, or how do you look at that?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, so that's a very it's a very important question, and it also is a very complex one. I don't think you'll be surprised. I'm an optimist. So let's contextualize the challenge in this way. There is a broad problem in American society. I won't say a problem. I mean, I wish it were different, but it's just it is a thing that's happening in American society, and that is that organized religion, and particularly we call them legacy institutions, are facing a great deal of challenge in terms of
crises
in maintaining the size and the structures that they have had for decades or generations, and it seems pretty clear that younger Americans are interacting with organizations in a different way than me. I'm a Gen Xer. We kind of went along, and the generation before me were definitely joiners. The baby boomers, and so younger generations are interacting with organizational structures across the board in different ways. They want to work differently. They engage in leisure differently. They get involved in philanthropy differently. And there's no point in putting value on it. The point is trying to understand how it works, so that you can engage people and provide something that's meaningful to them. So in Fort Wayne, we are a Jewish community that is smaller than it was in previous decades. No
Almost half the size
question.
smaller.
Okay. Yeah. So there's no question. However, we are a community that has, when I say we, I mean, here I am. But this happened long before I got here. We're a community that understood that in order to be able to thrive, we needed to be really smart about how we organized ourselves. So in recent decades, several Jewish organizations' efforts coalesced on the Rifkin campus on Old Mill Road, which is where Congregation Achduth Vesholom is located, as well as the Fort Wayne Jewish Federation and other Jewish organizations. So we realized we needed to cooperate in order to be able to thrive. And the generations that have come before me and before many of us who are active in Jewish life now have made it possible for the organization to have deep roots and the ability to weather kind of the long term. And so we're not going anywhere.
Right.
And so what's important for us now is to have a community that serves the needs of the Jews who are in our midst, and that includes non-Jewish members of families who are at the heart of our life. And very active and engaged and welcomed into our congregation and our community. And so the reason I feel optimistic is that we have a community that is just tremendously engaged with maintaining a vibrant Jewish life in Fort Wayne.
But you also have to look at the average age of those.
Sure.
And so if you look at that, I don't know if it will survive another generation.
Well, I think it will. And we have a small but vibrant religious school.
Right.
We have children who are choosing to advance their Jewish education into their teen years, which is a lot of times when kids across the board right. tend to disengage. And so, will we be a large community? Probably not. But I see that we have the ingredients and the capability and the people here to be a visible and vibrant community that is caring for one another and living our Jewish mission in our community and in the world around
right.
us.
Do you think that because with the younger people, do you think they're not wanting to do organized religion? Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a difference between faith and religion? Because a lot of them will say that they're spiritual.
Sure.
Or they're searching for meaning in their lives, and that's where the whole, I think, meditation and mindfulness,
sure.
The sense of the benefit of prayer. Mm-hmm. So, do you think that there is a difference between like faith and religion?
I think that people have different experiences and ways of talking about how they connect to the holy, the eternal. Mm-hmm. I say God. And I think that many people associate the idea of religion with particularism, being tied to a kind of being one thing, and by definition, it's not other things, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so there are people who kind of function and live outside of that type of structure. And I think for many people, religion is something that is a word that doesn't mean much to them, or maybe is uncomfortable for them. I think that within religious life, certainly within Jewish tradition, there's a great depth of spiritual tradition in our Jewishness, and so my goal as a rabbi is to help each person that I encounter mm-hmm. Jewishly to be able to find their connection to Judaism and to Jewish life, so that they can connect to spirituality, but also find meaning in their life. So religion is, I think, kind of a package, and spirituality, I think, is sort of what you find inside, and the structures and the words may be different. A person from different traditions may be spiritual, but they will use very different language, right?
Right.
I think it's more alike than not alike. But it's not so important to me that people use the words that I want them to use.
Right. What about the idea of being culturally? Like a lot of people will say, well, I'm culturally Jewish, but I'm not necessarily affiliated with a congregation or a temple.
Sure. Well, we are a Jewish people. So a people has a culture. It has a body of laws and norms, and it has a religion. And so in America, we talk about religion. I'm this religion, or I'm that religion. I'm Protestant. I'm Catholic. I'm Jewish. Oh, that's your religion. And that is sort of a foreign concept to Judaism in a way. By that, I mean we're just Jewish.
Right. We just live this.
We live this life.
We live this life.
Yeah.
Right. Like someone was saying to me, like someone was asking me at this point in my life if it's is important to me if I was to marry someone Jewish, and I said yes because it's the. And he said, well, why? You know, it's not necessarily the practice of the religion. I said, no, it has to do with the values, the way you were brought, the whole package of it, the importance of family and the role and how it plays, that it's not what somebody practices as their religion. It's this way you live. And just that it's just like this, it's like in my DNA, in a sense.
Yeah.
That is, that you can't, I couldn't separate out like my religion from my values.
Right.
They're intertwined to me.
Right. That is the experience of many, many, many Jewish people. And I think that, the question of, people who are, culturally Jewish, well, that's their expression of Judaism.
Right. They just don't think that they do some of the dogma of the practices, people, and I think though, but in Fort Wayne, because it is such a small Jewish population, and one of the things that I find, and I'm curious, if the role of educating the community and being engaged in the interfaith community and getting people to understand that, like people would say, oh, well, are you, like they think that I'm Orthodox so that I keep kosher and I don't drive, and but understanding that just like there are different forms of Christianity, there are different forms of Judaism. But where do you see the importance of educating the community about Judaism and what it means to be Jewish, and then how you see that role in terms of the interfaith dialogue and connections within Fort Wayne, because we are the city of churches.
We sure are.
So I always feel like, does that set the tone when we're trying to be welcoming and inclusive and diverse? Is that really fair to sort of designate us that way? So I'm curious although you've only been here a little less a year, but how you see that, and also your role as a rabbi to educate and engage with the community at large and the interfaith community.
Sure. So to be Jewish anywhere in America, outside of some very few and specific places, to be a Jew in America is to live with a sense of being a minority, and so and all the more so in Fort Wayne,
right?
Because it's a smaller city, and we're a smaller community,
right?
So it's very important, and it's very important in my mission as a rabbi, to obviously serve the Jewish community inwardly, but also to serve the Jewish community by creating and maintaining visibility for us across the entire community. Now, granted,
you have been limited by doing that because of COVID.
Well,
so
COVID,
in all fairness,
yes, true.
But going forward,
it's true. But and so the role of a rabbi, and my role is also to be available and to be an active part of the community. So I have already had an opportunity to teach some classes at higher education professionals who are going into who may be serving patients in medical field. So to understand Jewish culture and some of the needs and interests of Jewish patients. And I imagine, I will continue to do that. We get people calling to ask to tour the temple building, and after COVID, we'll be very happy to have you do that. But also being involved with the greater Fort Wayne interfaith community. And so Congregation Achduth Vesholom has had a long-standing relationship with the interfaith community in Fort Wayne. We cooperate with a number of congregations each Thanksgiving to have an interfaith Thanksgiving service. Sadly, this this year we were not able to do it because of COVID. But these are long-standing relationships that predate me, but that I have the benefit of being able to have colleagues already. And so it's very important that we have a seat at the table in terms of talking about, interfaith. Well, actually means interfaith, not just like, not just within the bounds of denominationalism, right? But actually across faiths. It's very important that we engage in that conversation and be visible and show, and where our values align, which are in many, many, many ways, to be able to help one another in terms of social justice work and other very important initiatives in the community.
And how do you see that play specifically with all the results that happened this past summer with the deaths, African Americans, and then with the protests, and how do you see that that role in the community? Because you and I have talked about that it's not just in Fort Wayne, but nationwide. I think the understanding the history of the relationship between the African American community and the Jewish community, but also how we have so much more that's similar than different. And how do you see being able to help bridge that role, or what do you think should be done in that sense?
I want to be very, very clear and very precise in terms of expressing, any solidarity is saying I'm here for you. Saying my experience is like yours, I want to be very careful about that, because I think it's important that I listen and that I learn from the experience of other oppressed peoples. Being able to acknowledge the privileges I do have in the world that other people do not have, and there are also, and as we've discussed them, there are also particular challenges and areas of concern for living as a visible Jewish person in this country.
Well, I don't think that people are saying, oh, that we're similar, that that I can understand how you're oppressed versus I'm oppressed, because I did have this conversation with several of the African American women when they were running for office, and they were talking about being a minority, and I was saying, well, as a Jew, I'm a minority, and then they were talking about, but it's their skin color. So, and I don't think it's a matter of trying to say that. I think it was more trying to be empathetic, and saying that we can we never understand the other's we can't walk in their shoes, but we can sort of walk alongside them to understand their what happened and their experiences. So, because I know also you, when you did a curriculum for teens about social justice, and you talk about the right things to do when looking at trying to practice social justice, and you said one of them is to listen and and not to compare their sort of oppression to your oppression. And
I think it comes down to understanding myself as a Jew as being in my generational history of being an oppressed people, and that commands me to work for justice in the world, and specifically that means that I need to be an ally, and so I see being an effective ally in this time and place as listening, and being prepared to ask how I can be helpful, and to not make any assumptions about how my experience is in parallel with someone else's. That said, I think that we have, I think the Jewish history in America, we have walked along and been involved in the civil rights movement in the 1960s, and it has been a part of the call to action that Jews in that time and that place experienced. So we're the inheritors of that, and that's a huge responsibility.
And so do you think, as we enter this time of Passover, where we're really understanding the oppression of going, from slavery, and the recognizing the history and remembering the Holocaust, and you reflect on that, and then you look at everything that's also going on today, and you put that together, are you hopeful for the future? what do you think that we can come together as one community, and or do you think that the divisiveness and the hatred and the bigotry and racism, is it going to, some people just continue to feed and create more division? Now you did say that you're an optimist, so but are you hopeful?
I'd say at this moment, in the spring of 2021, we have a lot of serious things to be worried about, and a lot of things that demand our attention. And that said, yes, I am optimistic. I can't predict what things will look like, but I have a great deal of faith in human nature and the ability for human beings to reach across difference and to be able to find common ground. I have a pretty unshakable faith in that, and I'm concerned. So I guess optimistic, but I realize that it might sound a little crazy some days.
Right. Well, based on at the end of each And Good Company program, I ask guests the same 12 questions that Marcel Proust popularized from a Victorian parlor game.
Okay.
So, what is your favorite word?
Love.
What is your least favorite word?
Hate.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Music.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Loud conflict between people.
What sound or noise do you love?
I like the sound of walking on crunching snow.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Loud, banging kitchen noises.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Oh, I had a fantasy. I still have. I had a fantasy as a younger person. I want to produce radio documentaries.
Huh. What profession would you not like to do?
I would not be a very good lawyer.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
Oof. Being able to serve a community as a rabbi.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
I've been asked that question in other contexts, and the answer that usually comes up, and I feel it today, Julia Child.
Okay. How would you like to die?
Peacefully.
If heaven exists, which I know in the Jewish faith there's issues of heaven, but what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I believe in an afterlife, and...
You do?
I do.
Wow.
And I will...
That's rare.
We call it the world to come. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Welcome.
Well, I welcome you to come back and have another chance to have a conversation and to continue, especially as you be able to get out into the community of Fort Wayne and do some good work.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. You can learn more about And Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at andgoodcompany.info. We look forward to next week when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.